Did you know that the Jesus and the Apostles quoted a Bible that was written in Greek, not Hebrew? In the quiet, majestic halls of ancient Alexandria, a decision was made that would forever alter human history. Centuries before the birth of Christ, the sacred scriptures of the Jewish people existed exclusively in original Hebrew. As empires rose and fell across the ancient Mediterranean, the geopolitical landscape underwent a dramatic transformation. Following the swift, sweeping conquests of Alexander the Great, Greek established itself as the universal language of trade and culture. Jewish communities scattered throughout the vast Hellenistic world began adopting Greek as their primary everyday tongue. In vibrant metropolis cities like Alexandria, entire younger generations grew up unable to read their ancestral Hebrew scrolls. Their faith remained deeply devout and rooted, yet a growing linguistic barrier threatened to disconnect them from their holy heritage. To bridge this expanding chasm, a bold and ambitious project was launched to translate the Hebrew Torah into Greek. An enduring legend recorded in the ancient letter of Aristeas claims 72 scholars were summoned to complete this task. Separated into isolated quarters, they allegedly produced 72 word-for-word identical translations through divine inspiration. While modern historical critical analysis views this miraculous story as pious folklore, the reality of the translation is beyond dispute. In truth, dedicated teams of anonymous Jewish scholars worked over generations to translate the entire Old Testament scriptures. This monumental collection became universally known as the Septuagint, taking its iconic name from the Latin word for 70. The translation was far more than a mechanical substitution of words. It represented a profound cultural and literary adaptation. It allowed Greek-speaking Jews throughout the diaspora to read, study, and embody their sacred texts in a Hellenistic world. When early Christian apostles began traveling and preaching across the vast Roman Empire, they carried the Septuagint in their hands. Because the entire Mediterranean basin already spoke Greek fluently, the Septuagint became the effective Bible of the early church. Fascinatingly, when New Testament writers quote Old Testament prophecies, they overwhelmingly quote from the Greek Septuagint. Consider the famous prophecy in Isaiah regarding the young woman who would miraculously conceive and bear a child. The original Hebrew text utilized the specific word Alma, which designated a young woman of marriageable age. When Alexandrian scholars translated this passage into Greek, they selected Parthenos, which explicitly translates to virgin. Centuries later, Gospel writers like Matthew drew upon this exact Greek phrasing to announce the birth of Jesus. This single translational choice profoundly influenced Christian theological doctrine and sacred art for 2,000 years. Without the Septuagint, the rapid, unstoppable spread of early Christianity throughout the Gentile world faced immense barriers. It served as an indispensable bridge, connecting ancient Semitic tradition with the broader Mediterranean consciousness and philosophy. The Septuagint proved that divine truth was never locked within a single sacred dialect or localized language. It demonstrated to the ancient world that Scripture could speak every human language without losing its sacred core. Yet, as the Christian Church embraced the Septuagint, Jewish scholars gradually moved away from it to reaffirm the Hebrew text. This historical divergence led to subtle differences in canonical scriptural traditions across various Christian denominations. Catholic and Eastern Orthodox Bibles retain several historical books preserved exclusively within the ancient Septuagint collection. Protestant traditions later aligned their Old Testament canons strictly with the surviving medieval Masoretic Hebrew manuscripts. Despite these ongoing denominational differences, the immense historical importance of the Septuagint remains entirely unquestioned. It stands today as the oldest surviving continuous translation of the Hebrew Bible in existence anywhere in the world. Every modern translation sitting on your bookshelf right now owes a deep intellectual debt to those pioneering scholars. They proved to humanity that translating sacred texts was not a compromise, but an act of profound spiritual devotion. Their meticulous, painstaking labor ensured that ancient spiritual wisdom could cross rigid borders and endure through centuries. As we look back at the origins of the Septuagint, we see an inspiring story of cultural survival against all odds. It was born out of a community's urgent, passionate need to keep its children connected to the words of life. That localized Alexandrian effort ultimately laid the foundational groundwork for a global literary and spiritual legacy. Today, ancient papyrus fragments of the Septuagint continue to yield incredible, groundbreaking insights for biblical scholars. They offer an invaluable historical window into how ancient readers understood their own holy texts thousands of years ago. The story of the Septuagint is ultimately a story about the transcendent, unifying power of human translation. It reminds us that language is a vital bridge designed to bring people closer to timeless, universal truth. Long after the empire of Alexander dissolved into dusty history, the Greek words of the Septuagint still resonate deeply. They carry the voices of forgotten scholars who labored silently in the shadows of the great library of Alexandria. Their individual names have vanished into time, but their collective work shaped the trajectory of the modern world. Every time a scripture passage is read in any language other than Hebrew, that ancient legacy continues to live on. The story of the Septuagint reassures us that divine truth is never distant, isolated, or unreachable. It reaches across geographical boundaries, massive cultural shifts, and changing centuries to speak directly to seeking hearts. Imagine an ancient synagogue in Alexandria, filled with devoted worshippers gathering together on a quiet Sabbath morning. As the heavy parchment scroll is unrolled, the familiar Greek words echo clearly through the crowded, attentive hall. For the first time in generations, young boys and girls listen intently and understand every single sentence spoken. The heavy wall of language falls away, leaving only the direct, powerful presence of the sacred message. That quiet moment of deep understanding in Alexandria reshaped the future trajectory of Western civilization forever. It set in motion a global movement that would carry ancient faith into every far corner of the known earth. The early church thrived precisely because it spoke the common, accessible language of ordinary working people. Proclaiming the gospel message in Greek meant that anyone, from humble merchants to elite scholars, could participate fully. The Septuagint demonstrated to humanity that translation is inherently a profound act of radical inclusion. It opens wide doors of understanding that strict linguistic isolation keeps firmly shut against seeking individuals. Throughout centuries, scholars have marveled at the sheer scope and ambition of this ancient translation project. Translating complex poetic metaphors, deep wisdom literature, and strict legal codes required unprecedented literary skill. Each translator faced the delicate challenge of preserving sacred meaning while adapting naturally to dynamic Greek idioms. In certain books, the translation is strictly literal, holding tight to Hebrew grammar and sentence structure. In other books, the literary style flows naturally with eloquent, beautiful Greek poetic cadence and rhythm. This diverse tapestry of translation styles reveals the distinct hands of many devoted scholars working over time. They worked tirelessly without personal fame, financial reward, or institutional recognition for their massive effort. Their ultimate reward was seeing their entire community transformed by clear, direct access to the Holy Scriptures. When we read the New Testament today, we are reading words framed within this rich Septuagint context. The foundational vocabulary of grace, faith, righteousness, and salvation in Greek was refined by those Alexandrian translators. They forged the precise theological language that early Christian thinkers and church fathers would later build upon. Without their foundational work, early Christian writers would have lacked a shared theological vocabulary for their writings. The Septuagint provided the essential literary raw material for the massive expansion of global Christian thought. It bridged the gap between ancient Near Eastern Semitic culture and classical Western philosophical traditions. This remarkable intellectual synthesis enabled the sacred story to engage directly with Greek academic discourse. Philosophers and historians of the ancient Greco-Roman world suddenly had direct access to the Hebrew worldview. For the first time in history, non-Jewish thinkers could read and evaluate the ancient laws and prophets independently. The Septuagint brought ancient Israel out of cultural isolation and onto the prominent global stage. It proved that sacred ideas could thrive in new geographical environments and fresh linguistic expressions. As centuries passed, the Septuagint continued to serve as the textual foundation for numerous new translations. It was subsequently translated into Coptic, Ethiopic, Armenian, Georgian, and Old Latin across many distant lands. It became the primary spiritual root system from which Eastern Mediterranean Christianity drew its ongoing strength. Even today, the Eastern Orthodox Church uses the Septuagint as its official, authoritative Old Testament text. Its enduring authority across 2 full millennia is a clear testament to its unmatched historical impact. When you carefully examine the history of biblical literature, the Septuagint stands as a monumental landmark. It marks the precise historical moment when a localized sacred tradition transformed into a universal human treasure. The anonymous translators of Alexandria could never have envisioned the immense, vast reach of their work. They simply sought to solve a pressing, practical problem for their local faith community living in Egypt. Yet, through their humble faithfulness in a forgotten place, they altered the trajectory of global history forever. Their inspiring story calls us to view translation work as a sacred task of empathy, connection, and understanding. It shows that crossing cultural boundaries to build mutual understanding is always worth the painstaking effort. The timeless legacy of the Septuagint reminds us that words possess the incredible power to cross any divide. No matter how distant or strange a foreign language may seem, timeless truth can find a home within it. As long as people search for light and meaning, the quiet work of those ancient translators will keep shining. They cut a wide doorway through the barrier of language and held it open for all future generations. Millions upon millions of readers across the globe have walked through that open door ever since. The story of the Septuagint stands as an enduring testament to the power of faithful human endeavor. It demonstrates that when human literary skill meets a profound spiritual need, history itself is rewritten. The Greek scriptures of Alexandria remain one of humanity's absolute greatest intellectual and spiritual achievements. They bridge the gap of ancient civilizations with our modern era, connecting us to a rich heritage. As we ponder their quiet labor, we are reminded of the profound ongoing responsibility of cultural stewardship. Passing down ancient wisdom successfully from generation to generation requires immense courage, skill, and dedication. The legendary 70 scholars may belong to poetic myth, but their real historical legacy is undeniable. They gave the ancient world a shared Bible and gave the future an enduring bridge of hope and truth. Their meticulous work echoes down through the long corridors of time, inviting every seeking person to listen. In every translated word, we can hear the strong heartbeats of a community seeking to preserve its soul. Within that ancient Greek text, we discover a rich story that ultimately belongs to all of humanity. It serves as a reminder that devotion often expresses itself through diligent, quiet, and unheralded intellectual labor. The translators expected no glory, yet their work outlasted the mighty empires and monuments of their era. Every modern biblical scholar standing before ancient manuscripts walks upon the strong foundation they laid down. Their willingness to embrace a new language allowed timeless truths to flourish across vibrant new cultures. They showed that true faith is never fragile. It can adapt to new words without losing its sacred substance. Through their work, the stories of Genesis, the songs of David, and the warnings of Isaiah reached countless souls. The ancient Mediterranean world was changed because a small group of scholars sat down to write in Greek. As you reflect on this history, consider how a single act of faithful service can echo across centuries. The Septuagint remains a shining beacon of what human dedication can accomplish when driven by purpose. It stands as a timeless reminder that light, once translated into the world, can never be extinguished. Their legacy lives on in every home, church, and library where sacred texts are read and cherished today. So, the next time you hold a Bible, remember the anonymous scholars of Alexandria who made it possible. They opened the door of language so that the entire world could hear, understand, and believe.